For each character, I'm going to show you which interaction I like the most and how I want to choose my V triggers, my V skills, and how that can influence the match. I'll do this very quickly per character so you guys can be able to get. If you disagree, feel free to put your comments in the match here. Maybe we don't agree on Gill. Maybe we don't agree on how we want to approach the Ken or Kage match. Let me know your thoughts and your choices so we can compare and contrast. So we as a community, you know, we can come together, we can have some discussion as well, okay? So don't be shy. Let me know how you feel about my choices as they compare to yours, okay? So let's just get right into it. Okay, so looking at this chart, we're gonna use a very simple chart to do this. Make sure this is as clear as day. So this one's gonna be V trigger 1, V skill 1. And then we're gonna talk about V trigger 1, V skill 2 on this. And then we're gonna have V trigger 2, V skill 2, and of course V trigger 2, V skill 1 here. Now if you don't know which one it is, the simple way to look at these V skills is the V skill 2 for Balrog charges his punches, makes them hit multiple times. It's a great move, although nerfed in 2022. V skill 1 is the spin, or KKB as it's formerly called. No one, you know, that's what it's called. And you can do a spin that goes through fireballs. It gives you the mix-up opportunity, high or low, and gives you some interesting overall control of the match, especially when it comes to fireball characters. V trigger 1 allows a rapid succession of punches in that combo where you can just boom, boom, boom. You can be able to do a combo kind of extension with EX, or in some cases just go into super, while V trigger 2 gives Balrog this 7-frame command grab, allowing him to rack up the stun quickly and try to decimate his opponents. I'm going to go into why I choose each one for each character, so as you can see from this chart, you'll be able to understand why I choose one thing or the other. Our most popular character on Twitter, let's go talk about Alex. So for Alex, I like to pick V trigger 1, V skill 1 now compared to 2021. In 2021, I like to pick V trigger 1, V skill 2, because V skill 2 allowed me to get in on Alex for free. So right now, as far as this month of the year, I like V trigger 1 and V skill 1 back again against Alex, because right now he's never been more powerful, and I can't afford to give up my turn against that character just because I misinterpret an opportunity to do V skill 2. So that's how I see that. For Dhalsim, right now I'm running V trigger 1 and V skill 1 for Dhalsim. You can go through some of his slow fireballs, and that's useful, but what I really like is the comeback opportunities that V skill 1 affords me, as well as V trigger 1 being able to convert from dash punches when Dhalsim is doing one of his limbs where I'm either interrupting them or I'm whiff punishing them from full screen. The damage output for that matchup in this scenario from far away is unrivaled, so you want to be able to do that instead of V trigger 2 or V skill 2. It just doesn't work out for Dhalsim. I think that's not the right choice. Next up, let's talk about Dan. So Dan, I think V skill 1, V trigger 1 is going to be good, and that is a common theme for a lot of the Shotos or Shotokans in the game. Why do I pick V trigger 1, V skill 1? Well, one, he does have a fireball, and this is helpful when he does some fireball strings. Other than that, V trigger 2 and V skill 2 doesn't give you the same kind of strengths that you really need in the match, and I don't think that useful in comparison to what you could be doing there, because when Dan does his V trigger 1, you can see that there's going to be, you know, enhanced fireballs and things like that, and that might be difficult to deal with, so you want to use V skill 1. Okay, so here's another thing. Let's switch it up a little bit, and let's talk about why I would choose V trigger 2, V skill 2. Again, V trigger 2 is the command grab move, and V skill 2 is the multiple hitting move. And what a surprise, I'm going to pick Zangief here. So Zangief, I really enjoy using this combination because his V skill 1 is still the superior V skill against any character that doesn't have a fireball or anything of that nature, and he's able to flex through a lot of my dash punches and other types of attacks. So what you're looking for and what you might need to consider when looking at these charts is, how does the V skill change the match entirely? Well, it does. So normally I'd have to choose between doing a dash punch or dashing up and throwing. But because of V skill 2, I can be able to threaten the opportunity to do multiple hits, breaking his armor automatically, and then carrying him to the corner, which helps me win that matchup immensely. That is one of the best uses of V trigger 2 and V skill 2. While V trigger 2, you might say, well, why are you choosing V trigger 2? Can't you still choose V trigger 1? Well, A couple reasons why I like V Trigger 2. It allows me to have a command grab mix-up on a character that sometimes stays stationary doing crouching light punches. I can be able to walk up and either vacuum up that normal, or I can like just grab him because sometimes he has moves that are throw invincible. So I like both the V Trigger 2 and the V Skill 2 primarily in this match, which is a rare combination for me. You won't see me do V Trigger 2, V Skill 2 too often. I might have a couple other choices here, but let me know what you guys are choosing as well. Cammy, I like to pick V Trigger 1, V Skill 2 a lot. I started doing this in 2021 and that was mostly because of the changes, but now I really like it because similar to Zangief, I don't want to really give up my turn. Cammy, her stun is low enough and her health has been reduced to 900. So if I can land a couple of these dash punches, they're very high stun, hit them with the charged V Skill 2, carry them across the screen, and then I think that that is a very good way to maintain pressure on Cammy, because honestly, it's difficult to maintain pressure on Cammy because of her dive kicks and things like that. So I like V Skill 2 personally. I may have some people disagree with me, so definitely let me know why you might choose one thing or the other, or what value you might be getting from your particular choices. So let's talk about Laura. Laura, I've also been using V Skill 2 and V Trigger 1. Now, I was using a lot of V Trigger 2, V Skill 2, and I might change my mind about this one later. I'm not entirely sure, but in this match presently, my favorite way to play this is V Trigger 1, V Skill 2. V Trigger 1 because I definitely need the opportunity to interrupt some of her electric charges from far away with a dash punch into a conversion. While V Skill 2, I enjoy it because I'm able to put massive pressure on her, give her lots of plus frames where I'm doing +4, boom, I'm in her face and I'm able to mix her up. I think that's very helpful, especially when you're trying to be more consistent against Laura. I think Balrog can fight Laura at range 0, point blank, but in a difficult match, I've been trying to find new ways to win it. So after playing V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 forever against Laura, I presently recommend V Trigger 1, V Skill 2. So for Ken, I picked V Trigger 1, V Skill 2. And let me tell you, this combination, V Trigger 1 and V Skill 2, I really like, because for characters with slow fireballs like Ken that take a little while, you need to not just use V Trigger 1, V Skill 2, but have the tap at the ready. Tap is holding down a few buttons at the same time, and then you're gonna let it go. Now, it's been nerfed a little bit where you need to do level 2 or level 3 to get through some fireballs, but I have seen massive value from being able to shut down Ken's ability to do fireballs at range with V skill, with V trigger, with tap. Now you might be wondering, but Leo, you can already do this with V skill 1. Why would you do this with V skill 2 instead? Why would you take the tap risk and do all this other stuff? Well, I'll tell you why. I do not think a lot of dash punches are safe against Ken in general. His stand light kick has improved a lot. He's also able to reach with the dragon punches if he has a dash punch on block. And anytime I'm able to be more safe and more consistently pressure him, I really like. And so that's helpful, especially also a lot of his moves kind of move him forward, but they're not exactly super fast. So a surprise dash punch with lots of value there is very helpful. And then you can charge it back up, because Ken of all characters can't actually punish Balrog for charging that up after, say, an EX dash punch lands. Now, I've been trying this a lot and I might change my mind, but let me know what you guys think. I think I like V Trigger 2 and V Skill 2 with Kolin. Now, Kolin's a really great character. She's been nerfed like over and over and over. But my personal opinion is, similar to other characters, I like the chance of doing V Skill 2 in neutral, because in the Kolin match at the level I'm playing, there's a lot of like walking up just a little bit, walking up just a little bit. And I want to have that ability to, throw in a V Skill 2 powered up dash punch and then hit them, as well as take advantage of some of the ranges that we're trying to play the match at, which is mostly inside of the stand hard punch range for Kolin. Land a sweep and then make her guess between something like a command grab or not, because honestly, her defense and her ability to counter makes it so I really like using V Trigger 2 against her. Now, I might change my mind, but right now that's how I really feel about using V Trigger 2 and V Skill 2 in this matchup with Kolin, which is going to be a rare one. You're not going to see too many opportunities to use this combination as much. So let's get back to V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. So for Balrog, I pick V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. Honestly, it's just better for damage. You might sometimes see Balrogs pick V-Skill 2. I think that's okay. But a lot of times in this mirror, some of it does come down to a surprise attack. While keeping him at bay, I mean, you want to be close to him and things like that. You want to use V-Skill 2. You want to use V-Skill 1. Now, let me tell you, for V-Skill 2, you just don't have enough trickiness to it. Like if you're playing a mirror, in my opinion, if you're playing a mirror, you want to show people something that they've seen before and then kind of flip it on its head so that way you can surprise them. V-Skill 1 gives you more opportunities to do that, while I think V-Skill 2 is more about solidly approaching the match and just pushing them to the corner, because then you let them drag themselves away from the corner to win the game. Okay, V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2, I picked Chun-Li. So why do I pick Chun-Li like this? It's very similar to Ken. I use the turnaround punch against Chun-Li's fireballs. And so depending on the level of Chun-Li you're playing, they might be doing a little bit more fireball. So I love doing that. Also, they need to do a lot of footsies where they're going to be doing stand hard punch and some maybe even stand medium punches. With the new nerfs to her stand fierce, maybe I can now switch and just sweep it here and there. But I also have the ability to stop her advances and then just dash punch her and then carry her all the way to the corner. While with V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1, you're not really gonna V-Skill 1 through a fireball unless it's like literally point blank. I don't really think there's a lot of value for that other than that, because it's just so slow. So V-Skill 1 doesn't benefit as well unless they literally throw the worst fireball ever. But if they're throwing the worst fireball, then you're gonna make your own choices. So V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2, that's what I feel. Okay, so for Blanka, where do we have Blanka here? Boom. I used to pick V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2 against Blanka. I used to do this in 2021. I thought that was a good idea for a while, but I've now switched to playing V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. I get more V-meter, although I might not use my V-Trigger that much directly against him anymore. I think a lot of my matches against him, I'm using V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 because of the mix-up potential, as well as I really want him to bet it all on an EX up ball. So I'd rather do this with that potential overhead and or fakes. While V-Skill 2, it just doesn't work as much anymore, because again, some of his abilities to punish and or challenge normals up close, you're not going to get that as much value because V-Skill 2 is no longer +2. Now it's -2, and so you're going to have a lot of trouble trying to create offense from that, while instead people just need to get better footsies and play V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 against Blanka. That's what I think. Speaking of what I think, Falke. For Falke, I think V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 is the right choice. V-Skill 1 goes through all of her air fireballs, all of her ground fireballs. Even some of these double fireballs are just not a factor for Falke, and you're able to do some mix-ups where you can bait her EX uppers with some empty V skills, right? You do a V skill after an EX knockdown and you don't press anything. It's the same thing as trying to do a dash and also baiting Falke. So I recommend V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. V-Skill 2 doesn't really work for me. And V-Trigger 2, you'll end up getting slapped on the hand constantly trying to land the command grab against her. It just does not work. You don't want to have to wall your damage around a zoner with a command grab. What you really want with V-Trigger 2 is you want to be able to fight like a character that has to be next to you, or you're going to be fighting in close quarters, and your way to mix that up is to choose V-Trigger 2 and then grab them at a certain point. Okay, so let's keep it rolling. Okay, so V-Skill 1, V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2. I might go back and forth on this if you've seen me on my streams on twitch.tv One Time Hero, but for Akuma, I really like V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2, again, for the same reasons. It's reliant on me using tap, so I have to use tap properly, but when tap is used properly, it shuts down a lot of Akuma's work. So you might think to yourself, well, why are you still choosing V-Skill 2? It's because I would use tap for every fireball, and now V-Skill 2 gives me extra value. I land that tap on or turnaround punch on Akuma, and now I'm able to do a V-Skill charge, and now if he whiffs a down medium kick, a forward fierce, and things like that, he can pay much more dearly than just a dash punch that leaves me at disadvantage. Well, not a disadvantage, but I don't really want to be up close against Akuma from 1-foot situation because I can, you know, potentially lose my turn. I would rather do V skill 2, hit him once and then hit him twice, carry him to the corner, and hopefully just close out the game from there. Okay, Karin. Karin, I've been trying different things with her. For a while, I tried V trigger 2, V skill 2, which I still think is decently strong. However, I've been using a lot more to this effect, V trigger 2, V skill 1. I mean, I'm sorry, V trigger 1, V skill 2, because Karin is really good at controlling space, and I love using V skill 2 to control more of that space and B plus more often, and put her in situations where maybe she wants to wake up EX or do EX on block. I get more of those situations from here. Secondly, I think V trigger 1 against Karin specifically, for some reason she can win the game without V trigger, and so she is very liable to V reversal your attacks across. So that's why sometimes I would love to choose V trigger 2, V skill 2. So sometimes I switch between them, but for the sake of the argument, maybe just to populate the chart a little bit better, let me put some colors on here. F.A.N.G, I choose V trigger 1, V skill 1. Again, similarly, he does have some fireballs, of which sometimes you can go through them, and I think that's helpful. If anything, I just like the stun output that I can do from mix-ups and forcing him to do things like his EX escape and then try to throw him or punish him that way. That's my choice and my preference. Ibuki, I've actually played V trigger 1, V skill 1 all the time, even though at some points in the game, this was actually a better choice. Nowadays, I don't really want to lose my turn as often against Ibuki, so I'm going to choose V trigger 1, V skill 1. Similar to a lot of these other shoulders you're seeing here are characters with slower fireballs. I love using V trigger 1, V skill 2 against Kage, because for V trigger 1, I can get that dash punch damage from far away, leading to a big corner carry, and V skill 2 powers it up more because I have turnaround punch in the background, so I can be able to deal with these multiple hitting fireballs and therefore make Kage have to come to me. So as he tries to come to me, I'm pressing Stamp Fierce, I'm pressing other buttons, and I'm keeping him away from me mostly. And then when he tries to walk in on me or something like that, boom, I have a charged V skill 2 dash punch, so he has to think twice. Now, it also blows up armor. So when he does this charge move, one of his V skill 1s, that can go through that, and I think that's another way, again, to blow up some of their own choices. You don't usually get to choose online which one they're going to choose, but honestly, if I got the opportunity to see that, so maybe this is tournament in person, I would rather choose V skill 2 against a Kage that's using V skill 1. Okay, Lucia, I like to use V trigger 1 and V skill 1. I like to use V trigger 1 and V skill 1 against Lucia. Pretty straightforward here. She has these fire moves that are, you know, fireballs. Basically, it looks borderline like Mario. You just V skill through those. I think that's very, very good. I don't think you need to use turnaround punch really to shut those down. If anything, there's even strings where she does a pop up into it, and it's really not good because you could just V skill in between and then punish her. So you want to use V skill 1 against Lucia, but I will say, like, in some situations, this has been an interesting choice. But I have, you know, time and time again, if you want consistent results, I like V trigger 1 and V skill 1 against Lucia. Now let's talk about E.Honda. I used to play V skill 2 and V trigger 2 against Honda. When he came out, I switched many times. I was here, I was there, I was here, I was there. But my ultimate choice against E.Honda in 2022 is V trigger 1, V skill 1. Now let me tell you why. The nerfs to V skill 2 just make it really risky for me to be in that jab headbutt range. I don't want to be there. I don't want to be near his hard kick and things like that. And I'd rather just take the opportunities to mix him up. I'd rather have those instead of just trying to charge up, because he can punish me at range, I believe, after a normal rise. So I can't even charge up my V skill 2 because they've kind of nerfed it a little bit. So not my cup of tea. If you disagree with my distinction and me saying that I wanted a V trigger 1, V skill 1, love to hear your comments. Love to know what you think. So Luke, the only answer for Luke is to choose V trigger 1, V skill 1. It's honestly the only way out of this, because V trigger 1, V skill 1 is so important against fireball characters, these Shoto characters, and his fireball is so fast that you're going to want to use V skill 1. And you do want to use more solid mix-ups, because being close to him at -2 makes it so he can do his stand jab, which is 5 frames to challenge you, and it's gonna reach. It's literally gonna reach you, and you don't want to lose your turn over that. Now that the new 2022 Definitive Edition patch is here, you're gonna want to choose V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 for Luke. There's no doubts about it. Okay. Speaking of the Shotokans, let me talk about Ryu right here. Okay, Ryu, you're gonna want to choose V Trigger 1, V Skill 1. Now, Ryu is the most common character across the entire cast. Everybody plays Ryu every once in a while. Everybody dips into this, and so you want to use V Trigger 1, V Skill 1. If you want a long explanation of what this is, there's a video on my channel about the Ryu Balrog matchup. It's called like 10% of all players. But if you want to know right now, basically V Skill 1 dominates this match. Ryu's biggest strength is throwing a fireball, and V Skill 1 is his biggest counter to that. You can literally control that range from 2.5 squares away, and that is a really good tool to shut down something that Ryu is very good at. So anytime you can use a V skill to directly counter the strengths of another character, I think I like it. So for example, Ryu has that. Falke is in there with that same thing. Luke, obviously, I've done a lot of full screen V skill dash punches there. It's just a really good choice. It controls a lot of the space. It makes them think twice. Speaking of which, we can talk about Rose. So Rose is a good matchup for Balrog. However, Rose has gotten buffed, so I'm still kind of calculating what that's going to be and if I should come out with a tier list. But for Rose specifically, I think that V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 is the right combination for Balrog players, because she will do fireballs on block. V Skill 1 shuts those down, especially if they're slower fireballs, so you're able to V Skill 1 through those fireballs. V Trigger 1, very, very good, just period, because you're going to be able to get those dash punches to interrupt fireballs that she does that aren't on block, and then you can corner carry and or do the EX meter extension and then start beating up Rose pretty badly. So Guile, okay, boom. So for Guile, same thing. I like V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 because you can just V Skill 1 through a lot of his fireballs. You can be able to do the V Trigger to carry him to the corner, and if you want to do that, as you can tell, there is a theme here. If I can V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 carry Guile to the corner, it's his worst position in the game, right? He likes having you follow him over the full screen, right? So these V triggers and V skills help me control more space more often, and then also help me carry my character or carry my opponent all the way to the corner. While V Trigger 2, for example, like why would I not pick V Trigger 2? Well, I do like the stun and I have tried to do it. However, the only combination where that would even be viable is the V Trigger 2 V Skill 1 combination, which I've never tried against Guile. But I don't think it's a consistent choice because V Trigger 2 stun and his stun levels are not low enough where I think that's going to make a big difference. Like maybe if his stun was lower, like maybe, I don't know, maybe if he was more like a Seth kind of stun or Juri kind of stun or something like that, maybe that would be better. But for him, if you want to be more consistent, V Trigger 1, V Skill 1. Okay. So next up, I have Zeku. Zeku, I chose V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 because, like, again, you can go through grams really quickly, as well as mix him up, especially when he's in young Zeku mode where he doesn't have an EX reversal. That's why I like to choose that one a lot. I don't choose V Skill too much. It just doesn't work. I mean, if I could change V skills in the match, I would choose V Skill 1 for old Zeku, and then I would choose V Skill 2 in here, right? One of these combinations for young Zeku. So if he was only young Zeku, I would play V Trigger 2, V Skill 2. For G, I like to choose V Trigger 1 and V Skill 1, mostly to go through his fireballs, which control a lot of the game. Also, it's good for mix-ups. I like to make sure I can try to mix up the opponent. His wake-up frames are not that good. He doesn't have a 3-frame wake-up, so I think that's very helpful. He also doesn't have an EX reversal, so a lot of your risk-reward tables are pretty solid there. So if you want to be more consistent, I think V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1's good, especially if he does something like a hard punch cancel. I think you can V-Skill 1 through that, so that's really helpful. Against Akira, I like V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2. I like V-Skill 2 because, man, V-Skill 2 allows you to control some of those ranges, and she's very whiff punishable. A lot of her heavy normals, you're able to whiff punish her very easily effectively with Balrog, in my opinion. And then on top of that, if she whiffs them or does, like, you can just V skill 2 dash punch and then hold her in the corner. It's really, really good in comparison to V skill 1. V skill 1's main purpose is to go through fireballs, and Akira has one fireball and she has an EX fireball, and the EX fireball is basically instant. You're not going to react to that, and you're not going to tap it either. So V skill 2 I think is the right choice to kind of control the ground game and stay ahead of her. And if you can whiff punish, or even, yeah, if you can whiff punish, it's even better. So Abigail, I love Abigail. Abigail, I like to play V skill 2, V trigger 1. V skill 2 because I like to go through some of the charged armor moves. So as you can see, there is some kind of a correlation there. However, I like V trigger 1 because sometimes these armor moves happen from full screen. And so if I have an activation situation, I have V trigger 1 on and I have V skill 2 on, he tries to do a nitro run and I can then just do a charged V skill 2 dash punch and punish him for that with V trigger 1. So I think that's a really good example of something I could do from full screen or something like that. I think that's good. In other scenarios where he has the tire, V trigger 1, V skill 1, I mean, doesn't actually help you with the tire, but nor does V skill 2 and nor does V trigger 2. I do like V trigger 2 against Abigail. I'm never, sometimes I might oscillate between them, like maybe in a set to figure out more about that. So if you guys disagree, let me know. But I really like using V trigger 1, V skill 2 against Abigail. Okay, so let's go through this. We're almost done. We're like halfway, I guess. Poison, V trigger 1, V skill 1. I think it's really good. So Poison right here, I think it's really, really helpful to have her have to think about, you know, this combination. I think this combination is really good. Now, you can go V trigger 1, V skill 2 for the same reasons I've mentioned for Akira and some other ones. But in my opinion, V trigger 1, V skill 1 is going to be the best one for you, because sometimes in my experience, there's a little bit of like walking away. You're able to, you know, mix them up with an empty V skill here and there, go low and then try to attack them. While again, V skill 2, now that it's -2, maybe they block it. And then Poison's in more of her ideal ranges, and I kind of just don't want to be at a disadvantaged position and have her in her ideal ranges, right? So I'd much rather be a bit further, use V trigger 1, V skill 1, go low, and, you know, try my luck with V trigger 1, V skill 1, just because the damage output will be very good as well. Birdie. So for Birdie, I put him in V trigger 1, V skill 1. I really like that he is still super relevant for Balrog. I mean, a lot of his jumps are super strong and things like that. And you might say to yourself, well, Leo, where's the V skill 1 coming in? Like, I don't know why you're doing it. For me, a lot of the reason is because the V skill 2 isn't going to be that helpful. Birdies aren't really doing armored moves in neutral. The only thing he might do is a forward fierce, and even then he'll forward hard punch, and even then it doesn't really come up as often as you would think. So even though he has armored moves, V skill 2 isn't exactly shutting those down, because he's rarely going to really use them. And the other moves that he has pretty much have just super armor, right? Like not really super armor, but he has 3-frame armor EX on some moves, and so you might expect that could be helpful, but not really. You need to do a true melee against it, otherwise he's just gonna come at you. So I mean, there can be some scenarios where V skill 2 would be helpful, but my personal choice is V trigger 1, V skill 1. Oh, okay. So, Juri and V trigger 2, V skill 2. No, just kidding. It's V trigger 1, V skill 1. For the same reasons, he's similar to Sagat. So we'll put these two guys together. Juri and Sagat are similar in the sense that they have long range fireballs where V skill 1 can go through them. I really like doing that. I also like baiting Jurian players with an empty V skill and either going low and at the same time baiting the EX headbutt. Nowadays you can actually throw the EX headbutt, so if I think EX headbutt's coming, maybe I can actually just throw him. RIP Jurian 2022. But similarly, Sagat, I like choosing V trigger 1, V skill 1 for the same reason. Now, Sagat players are like high on pot news. They're just so excited about the new skills and the new buffs and updates and damage output. So honestly, if you're going to play, you still got to play V skill 1, because you need to be able to challenge that fireball game at any given time. And you want to, and it's difficult too, but I can't imagine how much more difficult it would be if I picked V skill 2. If I pick V skill 2, I basically make this match in Sagat's favor. Moving right along, let's talk about Gill. I have Gill here in V Trigger 1, V Skill 1. Now, I've actually done this. Might be the only character that I could play V Skill 1, V Trigger 2 against. I think I mentioned I might not even pick V Trigger 2, V Skill 1 ever, but you know what? I have done this against Gill is because 1, V Skill 1 goes through all the fireballs, and I think that's very great. And V Trigger 2 is especially special because if I'm using V Trigger 2, I do have the opportunity to mix them up with a V Skill punch. Boom. I'm +2. They're trying to mash parry, but I can mix between throwing regular for whatever damage and then V Trigger 2 for more damage and more stun. While V Trigger 1, V Skill 1 is a good choice too. So I'm kind of excited to, you know, admit that in front of you guys. Another good matchup for V Trigger 2, V Skill 2 is going to be Mika. Mika, V Trigger 2, V Skill 2 is a very good combination. I think you can definitely make this combination work because it becomes more of a brawling scenario against Mika. You know, V Trigger 1, V Skill 1, or, you know, I think you can choose personally V Trigger 2, V Skill 2 when it comes to Mika. For Necalli, now let's get to Necalli, right? For Necalli, I like V Trigger 1, V Skill 2. I think this is a very strong combination. He doesn't have a fireball that I can actually V Skill 1 through because he has this ugly spit stuff that comes out. His V Skill 2 does that. I think V Skill 2 is a better choice because you're going to be pretty consistent. He already has really terrible punishes against Dash Punch, and now at -2, you'll be right next to him. And so I think that's pretty good. If you use EX, he's going to be pretty disadvantaged, and you're able to either poke at him when he tries to put down the V Skill 2 spit or whatnot, and you can take him to the corner and then abuse the fact that Necalli has really stubby normals. And so once you're able to get him to the corner with some V Skill 2 action, you can definitely feel really comfortable with punishing him and controlling the space that he can influence. At the moment, I don't have a ton of experience against Oro outside of me playing him myself. There's been like a couple people online. I think me and Brian F can never connect because I think he's in Texas and I'm in you know, northern, like the West Coast, and so I just don't think that we connect. It would have to be something where we do a first 5 and I could give my analysis on what V triggers I think were good. In fact, I would even try multiple V triggers against him. But if I were to guess, or if I were to make a good idea of it, I think V trigger 1, V skill 1 is the right choice against Oro. He's going to do multiple types of fireballs, the fast ones as well as the kind of Orochi ball. And so for those, you're going to want to choose V skill 1. There could be worlds where I could use V skill 2, but to be completely honest, a lot of his output from punishing dash punches are not that crazy. Like he can do maybe crouching jab. Yeah, I think he can do crouching jab, but maybe he'll do light kick into EX. It's not really that serious where you need to have V skill 2 charge all the time. V trigger 2, well, again, V trigger 1, V skill 1 for Oro is the play. I think that's the right choice. Ed, V trigger 1, V skill 1. Ed has a lot of these psycho fireballs that you want to go through. You can go through, especially if he chooses V skill 1, you're going to want to V skill 1 through that. Absolutely on reaction. That actually makes his V skill 1 really garbage. You want to use it in that manner. Then you can really shut him down. I think that's a really good choice for you in the game. Like there's no better choice than that. For Vega, I think you want to choose V trigger 1, V skill 1. Now I'll tell you that this can be different. Okay, I have played V trigger 1, V skill 2. I've tried V trigger 2, V skill 2, and I keep coming back to this. Because even though Vega can V reversal and full punish the V trigger 1 block strings, what you're going to want to do is just be more careful with that. While at the same time, a lot of the dash punches can lead to somewhere between 25 and 30% just from playing footsies with Vega. You have your V trigger on and then you can dash punch them. While again, V trigger 2, if a person's trying to zone you and hit you here and there and here and there and here and there, then like that's not going to be good for a lot of the matches that you're going to play because you're thinking, man, I want to use my V trigger, but I keep getting slapped in the face. Well, that's what it'll be like unless you choose V trigger 1 against Vega. So I recommend V trigger 1 against Vega. If you don't know who you're fighting against and for some reason you're in a blind taste test, you're fighting a top streamer somewhere, you have no idea who they're going to pick, or maybe they pick 11 or something, which is like let's just say if they pick random, you're going to see predominantly that V trigger 1, V skill 1 is a good choice, but I just want to bring that up since there are some streamers playing these days. For Nash, V trigger 1, V skill 1, yep, that's my go-to. Love it. They can't throw fireballs from full screen if you can V skill 1 them on reaction. Also, they can't throw fireballs pretty much all the time unless it's a block string. So I think that Nash really does not like Balrog, especially if he's playing V trigger 1, V skill 1. For Sakura, it's the same thing. Sometimes she wants to do charge fireballs and, you know, all these shenanigans, but V skill 1 kind of shuts a lot of that down. So I wouldn't pick any other combination for Sakura. I think Sakura really gets shut down from the V skill 1 work. However, it is a bad matchup for Balrog. Check some of my videos from before. I do think that her ability to punish a dash punch really defines the way you have to play that match very differently than, say, Ryu, or I think you almost have to be ridiculously consistent with the way you do your dash punches against Sakura, but that doesn't mean that I'm not going to choose V-Trigger 1 or V-Skill 1 against Sakura. It's just the right choice. Menat, if you're ever playing Menat, you know, there's a 1% chance you might play Menat. I've played Menat, and every time I play Menat, V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1, that is the play. A lot of her moves are projectiles and not actually physical hits. And you want to be able to get a lot out of dash punches. After she does her stand medium punch, she's a little bit negative. You can always challenge with that. Now, if you have V-Trigger active and you're poking with the dash punch, you're going to be able to get, again, 25 or 30% damage from that. So that is something you got to look into. You got to check that out. Okay, so next is Rashid. Now, Rashid, I've actually gone back and forth over the last couple of years. Ever since V-Skill 2 came out, I tried out different ways to do this. V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2. I tried V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2. I've tried V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. And after trying every combination, including this weird combination, I settled on V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. V-Skill 1 can help you go through tornadoes. It can help you go through the heavy tornado in the corner when he does stand fierce into a heavy tornado. If you do that, then you can be able to go through those moves. I think without this V-Skill 1, I think it's a problem. And then if that's the case, why would I pick why shouldn't I pick V-Trigger 2? Again, same reason. He can zone you out with these hurricanes, and even though you can V-Skill 1, if you're trying to get the damage from V-Trigger 2 and he doesn't really have to be next to you, it can be really frustrating for you as a player, and you won't be able to be as consistent as you could with V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1. Few here, we have M.Bison. M.Bison, I have played many versions of M.Bison pressure. I've tried many a type of pressure. I've even tried V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 1. I've tried V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2, and I've landed, my personal feeling right now is V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2. I like using V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 2 against M.Bison because I like being closer to him, and if he's going to be running at me, some of the V-Skill 2 dash punches are good pokes that can carry him over the wall. Since he has slow walk speed, then we can play more footsies thereafter. I personally like this, but you will not be surprised if you catch me running other versions. So I've actually run, again, V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 against M.Bison, mostly to go V-Skill through his heavy Psycho Blast that he does with his hard punch into a heavy Psycho Blast. And so what I try to do a lot, if I remember who I'm playing, I might choose one or the other more so than the next, but I really do, as a kind of a default choice, I like to play V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2 against M.Bison. It's really fun for me, as well as it does help you in your match if you're thinking about M.Bisons that keep kind of running into you and you want to counter poke. I think V-Skill 2 can get you more value, while instead for V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1, you'd have to wait a little longer to do it. Seth is on my next on my list, and V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 is very good for Seth. I think that, honestly, I've experimented with all these combinations. It felt like a really good idea to experiment. Like, I had to figure out what I liked, what makes sense for myself. And so obviously you guys might have understandings for yourself where you think things fit. And so I'd love to hear your feelings. If you say, oh man, Leo, you should try out V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2, or hey Leo, V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 1. Hey, one time V-Trigger 2, V-Skill 1 that is what I use for everything. I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I've definitely tried everything against people when these combinations came out and as they've been buffed. V-Skill 1, you can go through some projectiles, either the ones that he grabs with V-Skill or even his own V-Skill. I think it's a projectile and you can be able to go through it, and that's the reason why I choose this. V-Trigger 1, also same reason. Like, a lot of V-Trigger 1 stuff is mostly about getting damage from dash punch, especially if V-Trigger 1 is active. And secondly, I'm looking for Cody is an interesting one. I think that for Cody, if you play V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1, it's really good. But I actually, let me see, where's my notes? What? Last year I played a lot of V-Skill 2 against Cody, but now I'm playing more V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 1 again. But I might change. But sometimes he likes to do these tornadoes on EX tornadoes, and you can V-Skill through them. And so sometimes I like that, but then other times I'm just like, if it wasn't for the nerfs in 2022, I would definitely have more characters in V-Trigger 1, V-Skill 2 combinations, but instead it's kind of limited. Like, I want to keep it real clean, and I'm kind of moving people in and out of the top two brackets here. But yeah, so right now for Cody, I like it against Tornado. I think that's a good choice. I like it mostly for mix-ups as well, But V skill 2 is a good poke against Cody, and I do think that Cody does give Balrog lots of trouble. Get back to me in a little while about how I feel about Cody, because sometimes I feel he does sit in this V trigger 1 V skill 2 area, but not as often as you'd think. Okay, lastly, Juri. Right now, or actually for all of 2021, I played Juri V trigger 1 V skill 2. I like V trigger 1 V skill 2 against Juri. I like poking her with V skill 2 from far away when she's trying to do her charge ups and things like that. It feels very impactful against her because you really can't use V skill 1 or even tap for that matter against Juri. She's never throwing a fireball of any value that you really feel like you should be doing. So V skill 2 is really good against her, and I think everyone should be doing that. Now, of course, if you're fighting a friend of yours and they can never block the overhead, always pick V skill 1. But I think on paper, V skill 2, V trigger 1 against Juri is a really good choice. Right here, we have 30 matchups where I'm going to choose V trigger 1, V skill 1. In the second row, I'm going to choose V trigger 1, V skill 2 for about 11 matchups, right? Only 11. So 22 in one of these, 11 in the next one. 4 V trigger 2, V skill 2 matchups where I feel like these are very strong. Kolin and something, I think there's some variation here you can consider. And for fun, and because I have done it and I don't think it's that bad, I think you can play V trigger 2, V skill 1 against Gill. But maybe because I think that even though Gill's better, he's not so great. If I were to make an adjustment, I would think maybe V trigger 1, V skill 1 is also, universally a good choice for Gill. So probably if you're trying to optimize 100%, I think V trigger 1, V skill 1 is great. But if you know the player and they like to parry all the time, I like to do V skill 1, V trigger 2 just to make them feel bad. Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to close out now. I think this is a really good overview of everything you need to know for these matches. I'll try to cut this down, and the link to this image will be posted in the Discord. And by the time you see it now, it'll be posted and pinned in the Street Fighter V Discord that I'm linking